Hi, my name is Angie Vishianan, and I'm the founder of Leg Up Legal. Thank you for joining us today. We started doing these meetups at the beginning of COVID-19 to allow students to connect with lawyers and other pre-law students so that they could get some information about the legal profession and law school that might help them in their journey. Today I have a special guest with me. His name is Mustafa. How do I say your last name?
Badreddin.
Badreddin,
A tough
awesome.
one.
And yeah, almost as tough as mine. And he's an in-house lawyer working at LinkedIn. He works in advertising law, which is kind of a niche practice area. So I think it'll be great for you guys to learn about it today. So Mustafa, I'll let you take it away.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So I think the best way to start, and there's many different ways we can take this, but I figured the best way to start would be to say to tell you guys what advertising law is all about. And then we can open it up for questions, but I could also talk briefly about my career if you guys choose and how I came to be an advertising lawyer, or just any other general questions that you have. Yeah, including what it's like to be at LinkedIn, which is, I think, pretty unique place to practice law or to work in general. All right, so advertising law. I think I like to break it up into three different areas, even though it is like a really niche practice, and I haven't come across in my career many lawyers that even know what it is. So it's not like just you guys in like law school. If I were to meet a lawyer today and tell them I'm an ad lawyer, I would probably have to explain to them what that is. Just I'm about to explain it to you guys, because I really don't think there's more than like 500-600 ad lawyers in the based on like conferences I go to. Like I really don't think there's more than that in like the country. It's pretty small practice. So like I said, three areas, and I'll tell you a bit about what I did in all of them and what I focus on today. So the first one is more what I would call like compliance, and that's really checking that advertising is legal, pretty much, right? So like a brand will come to you that wants to advertise, and they will give you their concept of an ad, whether it be like a TV ad, a radio ad, or even like a billboard or a digital spot like on the internet. They all have a message that they're trying to share, and that message needs to be and this is like the key, this is the heart of advertising law. If you crack up a book, if you take a course, the key is that all ads have to be truth and not misleading. So true and not misleading. So basically you can't lie in an ad. You can't mislead the customer in an ad. So, and that's true of like any industry. So if you're advertising a drug, you don't want to mislead the public in how it can treat you. If you're advertising even a toy, you don't want to be misleading in what the toy can do. And like, there's plenty of examples of that. I don't know if we grew up with, I grew up with watching toy ads, and the commercial would be showing a toy doing this like really cool thing, and it can't actually do that. The companies have gotten in trouble for that. So again, it's true and misleading. So compliance. So a client will come to you, they'll give you their concept, they'll tell you their like tagline, and you'll review it. You'll review it and tell them, well, here's what you have to tweak because we don't think you can like substantiate, essentially prove what you're saying, and there may be trouble with that down the line. So that happens a lot, and there are ad lawyers who do just this. Like some of my bosses, some of my partners at law firms I work with, all they do is just the compliance part, and they advise clients all day on what their ads can say and do. The other part, you're checking in compliance, and you might be more familiar with that because it's a bigger branch of law, and that's like just IP infringement, intellectual property. So again, a company will have an idea, a concept for an ad, and you need to check it for possible IP infringement. They might be mentioning other brands. If they're shooting a video, there might be other logos in the background, cars, other like name and likeness, like other human beings in this spot that you don't have permission to put them. So there's just a lot of like IP issues that come into advertising. And I know, talking to law students a lot, they tend to be interested in entertainment law as well as advertising, if they even want to dabble in this industry at all. And I'll say that like the IP part is pretty relevant in the entertainment space as well. It's the same thing, right? You can't infringe on somebody else's trademark or copyright in entertainment. So advertising and entertainment share that in a lot of ways. So that's the compliance. The middle part of it is litigation. Again, so this part, everyone is a little bit more comfortable in knowing what litigation is. But what's unique about advertising is it's very heavy into mediation. So not a lot of companies sue each other in court. Like, it certainly happens, but the first step is oftentimes mediation, and that's because there's an organization called the National Advertising Division, and you can look it up. It's the NAD, but they're a mediation board that's in the US, and it's essentially where advertising companies go to tell on each other. And they're not like binding, because again, it's mediation. But if you don't listen to the NAD has a really good relationship with the FTC, the Federal Trade Commission, which, just real briefly about it's like the governing body for everything advertising, right? The Federal Trade Commission is the federal body that's in charge of all of these false and misleading ads I mentioned. So if you do something that's misleading, the FTC is where you ultimately can get in trouble, and they can issue like huge fines. Like, just Google FTC fines and advertising, and you'll see like billions of dollars of fines going around. So you don't want to get reported to them. So usually companies will play ball with this mediation, the National Advertising Division. And so how it works, and this is, by the way, like the bulk from what I've seen in my career, most ad lawyers in a law firm that does advertising law, and again, there aren't many, but the ones that do, they most of their billable hours are spent with the NAD, the national, and doing this sort of mediation. So it's essentially one company will tell on another company, right? Literally, like you file. So just like you'd file a litigation, a suit, you would file. So if you're Coca-Cola and Pepsi does something you don't like, or that you think they're being false and misleading, or you think they're lying about your product, you would go to the NAD and you would tell them, you would write a brief, and then the NAD rules on it, right? Like, there's a whole process. There's a whole mediation process, and you don't go through the courts at all. So that is, like, again, like a huge amount of billable hours go into this. And a lot of companies use the NAD. It's not every industry that uses it. Some do choose to go straight to litigation, but a good amount choose to go through the NAD process. So that's what's fascinating.
So interesting that you bring that up, because since you said that there's a lot of overlaps with IP and advertising, I've seen that too. But the first time I ever heard of an NAD action was probably when I was like a third-year associate working in IP. And it just so happened that we had a client come to us that was, they had a case kind of side by side along a trademark infringement case. They also had an NAD action over this false advertising.
Yeah.
It was in comparative advertising. So somebody was comparing their brand to, their, that person's brand, and they were saying false and misleading things, right? So we were kind of playing the strategy for the IP action based off of what was happening in the NAD action. Yeah. And so that was the first time I had ever heard of it. And then as we started to dig into it more, and this can show you how separate it can sometimes feel in certain practice areas. Like, as we as IP lawyers started to dig into this more, we started to realize like the huge breadth of like what NAD actions were, and we were like, we need to go get an ad lawyer. So we went and found an ad lawyer that we kind of, consulted with on this case, because we realized like, hey, there's a lot of implications for things that they say in this NAD action that are going to drive what's happening in the trademark litigation. Yeah. It was just, it was super interesting. Yeah.
I'm actually surprised to hear that you came, again, like a lot of lawyers wouldn't have any idea what this is. It's just like such a small practice in the law that like, so the fact that you came across it is pretty unique. A lot of lawyers don't, unless you're in the space. And I don't think I did see it as a summer associate, because I was a summer associate at an advertising law firm. Like, that's how I started. But before that, I had no idea. I had no idea what the NAD was.
And when we went to go talk to the ad lawyer, he was like, "Oh yeah, you're in way over your head. You don't know what it is." Yeah. He's like, "We need to help you with all of this." And we were like, "Yeah, please help us with all of this." So. Yeah,
you're not gonna get an NAD class in law school.
You're not. It's good to build relationships with lawyers in other practice areas, right? Because even though I'm an IP lawyer and I don't know anything about the NAD stuff, whenever I get NAD stuff, I just send it to my friends who are ad lawyers, right? So
Exactly. So yeah, fascinating part. Again, it's like if you see an ad group in a law firm, they usually have like NAD experts because this is the way the billable work is. So yeah, and that's very similar. I mean, mediation is very similar. It's like, you know, litigation light. You're writing like briefs. I mean, they're not called briefs, but you're writing memos to the NAD. You're responding to your client's memos. So there's a lot of back and forth to that, and you're even going to the NAD office and making your case, right, to their staff, who are just lawyers, not judges, but who are lawyers who hear you out and make a decision. So it operates like mediation in a lot of ways, but for it's just specialized for the advertising field. So yeah, that's the litigation / mediation part. And then the third section of advertising law is the heart of what I have done, even though I've dabbled in the other two. But the third one is transactional, and that's doing contracts. And that is, if you think about it, like anything, just like every other area of the law, this entire practice needs contracts, right? So if you think about your contracts, if you're shooting a commercial with the talent, if you're talking about licensing something's IP for an ad spot, if you're talking about a production agreement, right? You need a location, you need actors, like I said, you need staff. So everything needs a contract. And I've worked on all of those in all aspects of advertising. I've worked on like contracts for it. Other big ones in this space that maybe are not as intuitive as this whole space is dominated by advertising agencies. They're the ones who make your ads or buy your ad space for you. And you need agreements with them. Those are huge master service agreements with a big brand, an advertising brand, and their agency. And I've done those extensively. I actually started my career in an advertising agency. So I was doing their contracts specifically for my first 3 years of practice.
And do you find that it's mostly, is it the clients that get the lawyers involved with the agencies, or is it the agencies that get the lawyers involved with the clients?
Well, I was a lawyer at the agency, so we were always involved. And like, so a client will come to us, want to use us, and very early on we share the contract with them, and it's very unlikely that they're not going to get their lawyers involved after that, right? So they'll then take our boilerplate language, and yeah, I'll have to have conversations with their lawyers. The interesting part of that is a lot of these brands don't have advertising lawyers, right? They don't have lawyers that know this business. So like they'll either use an outside law firm with an advertising lawyer, and there's not a lot of those either. Or like a big part of my job was to like educate the other side, who's usually like a more generalist lawyer or IP lawyer sometimes, about the ad industry. And a lot of it was just like, here's how the ad agency works, here's how the contract is structured this way, because it is different than, it's like a different way of thinking than like other types of service agreements. Because essentially they're service agreements, but advertising has some unique elements to it.
Nice.
Yeah, so the ad agreements were big. On the other side of it, I'll answer your question this way, though. When you're a brand and you're trying to onboard an agency, a lot of times, for the exact reason I said, a lot of times you think that they can just use your boilerplate like service agreement, because that's how all big companies work. They're like, you're just a vendor. You're just a vendor to them. So here's like a vendor agreement. Here's a vendor agreement. And if you give that to an agency, again, they're going to say like, this doesn't really work for us, right? Because it doesn't have like key provisions that are advertising specific. So it goes both ways, but the lawyers are like almost always involved because of that. As opposed to what I'm going to say next at like LinkedIn, I'll talk a little bit about that. And that tends to be a little bit different, and I'll explain why. So brings me right to it. Good segue. The other type of agreement is agreements with the media itself. So media is traditionally your TV networks, right? NBC, CBS, wherever you advertise. But obviously the advertising world has changed in our lifetime, and a lot of it is digital now, and a lot of it is Facebook, Google, online, or like the online banners, any website that you visit. And it's LinkedIn, right, where I ended up. So there is boilerplate industry digital buying agreements. So like there is industry respected agreements, and that's specifically in the US, and it's global as well, but it's called the IAB. So if you Google like IAB digital advertising agreement, you can all see it. There's not a hidden thing. The whole industry has it. You can download a PDF as soon as we're done. So because there's this standard language, there's a little bit of likelihood that everyone will just accept it, right? As opposed to what I was saying with the agency agreements. Right? So like there is a chance that like you can say, hey, we follow these IAB terms, and the brand, the advertiser will say, yep, we agree, and then it's over, and there isn't really much of a negotiation. There's a chance of that happening. And if you're familiar with the legal world, you know that perfect scenario doesn't always arise, and there will be tweaks requested by either side. But oftentimes, we can get away with both sides just agree on the AAB terms. So that's one reason it's not as heavily negotiated. Another reason is anyone here who's familiar with buying something online knows that you get terms and conditions that pop up when you're buying something. And a lot of times you just click through saying, I accept. And that's the end of it. And a lot of advertising buying happens the same way. Surprisingly, right? It was surprising to me as well, but it kind of makes sense. It's intuitive if you really think about it. So if you were to, all of you right now can hop onto Google, Facebook, whatever else, you know, Snapchat, all these apps that have advertising, and you can buy ad space like right now. You never need to speak to a lawyer, right? You're just going to create an account. You're going to like fill in some fields about what your advertising is. You're going to paste your advertising, and you just click OK, and you click I agree to the terms. You never need to speak to a lawyer unless of course you want to make changes to that agreement, and you have to assume that like these big players will even listen to you, because a lot of times you're not spending enough, right? The average person isn't spending enough for Facebook, Google, or anyone else to say like, yeah, let's play ball and let's amend the agreement. So again, that's another reason why it's like the lawyers don't get as involved as you would think in some of those deals, because they're easier. They're set up to be a lot to be like pain-free purchases. Just click accept, and so that is a reason for why my job is not what you would think it is. I'm not like reviewing every contract for advertising like on LinkedIn or like, so that's just not the job. But there are specific things about the job that we can get into. On that note, I could pause, see if there's any questions, and if not, I can tell you a little bit about, I guess, what it is like at LinkedIn. Or we could talk about my career. So any questions?
Hi, I have a question. My name is Ashley. I'm currently a pre-law student, and I never heard of advertising law, as you said. It's very niche, yeah. But I find it really interesting. And you mentioned that with when you do mediation, like with the NAD,
yeah,
you know, traditionally mediation is the decision is non-binding. So in those cases, was the decision made by the lawyers at the NAD binding?
Yeah, no. So the NAD will they'll hear out everything. They'll read all the briefs. They'll even invite you to their office to talk about the issues. And then they'll issue an opinion, just like a court would. And those opinions, I believe you can pull some of them on the internet as well, just to see how they're written. But they're not binding. They're like a recommendation, right? They're like a ruling, but they're just a recommendation. And the company who you recommended against has a choice to make. Are they gonna listen or not? So that's what I mean by non-binding. However, if the company chooses not to play ball at the end after the ruling, then the NAD can refer the case to the FTC, which is the Federal Trade Commission. And the Federal Trade Commission can choose to take it up in court where it will be binding. So that's the risk you take if you don't listen. You're gonna get told on by a higher power, and that's the risk, and that can hurt you. Another way you can reject, as a company can just say no to the NAD right from the beginning. They could just say, I'm not going to even take part of this mediation. And again, same thing. The NAD can say, we're going to report you to the FTC and tell them that you're refusing to play ball. So like they have the backing, like they're not themselves like a binding government agency, but they have the backing of the most powerful governing agency in this space, the FTC.
And they're actually, the NAD was created by the Better Business Bureau, right?
Yeah, yes, that's exactly right.
Yeah, so it's not a government agency. It's
no, it's not.
Very interesting. Thank you for clarifying.
Anybody else have questions? Come on in.
Yes. Hello, I have a question. Hi, Mustafa And hi, Angie. Hi, Ashley. Hi, Kendra. Hi, everyone else in the chat. I'm Adser. I'm a pre-law student also. My question is, have you ever come across these companies called multi-level marketing companies? Because how they advertise their business is they don't do like ads on the internet or the TV. How they do it is they try to get people into meetings and they advertise their company through their meetings. So I'm wondering if you ever came across those companies, and because I did come across like some of them, and their advertising is pretty shady, and I wonder how a person how to proceed in such a situation. Thank you.
Yeah. So yes, I'm familiar with those companies. Not because I'm an ad lawyer, but again, like I think if you're like a college student in America, you do get approached by these things all the time. Yeah, there's so many. Like I'm probably a little bit older than you, and like when I was in college, they were big as well. So I know exactly what you mean. So yeah, not naming any specific players because there's been many of them. It is. I mean, all the same rules apply, right? Like you're not in a different like legal category when you because you're advertising like in a different way, right? You still need to be truthful and not misleading, right? The reason they're more under the radar is because of their business model, right? They're not putting things on TV where literally a billion people can view your, like the power of media is like, I think we underestimate it, right? It's like the numbers are vastly different when you advertise on TV or like even digitally versus like inviting people to like, a room or even a small conference to tell them about your marketing. So they are potentially being false and misleading, right? But there's less exposure. So you're not hearing about like lawsuits against them as much because it's not as affecting as many people as like a false ad on TV would. But same rules apply. You just have to prove it, right? And so like, yeah, if they're being false and misleading in any specific way, there is potentially a false and misleading advertising suit there or claim there. However, I'll say that a lot of these companies, they may be doing things that are even more shady, as you say. Like, so you may get into the area of like it's just straight fraud, right? Because like how they're dealing with, I mean, potentially, right? I don't know any of the issues here, but like potentially they're straight fraud because there's money exchanging here, and who knows if their promises are correct, right? Like or potentially could be correct. So I think if you were to do the research about companies who have gotten in trouble in this space, you skip right over like the ads, like the truth and misleading, and then you go right into fraud, which is more serious, right? A big theme of law is you throw out like, you know, you sue a company for like everything. Like you're not just going to make one claim, right? You make all the claims if something wrong is happening, and like fraud is a way bigger deal than just false or misleading advertising, that a lot of times these companies get in trouble for just straight fraud, which is like,
and there's also deceptive trade practices.
Yeah, exactly.
Too. So, you know, you might see all rolled into one: false advertising, deceptive trade practices claim, and a fraud claim. And so that's going to be beastly for them to fight.
Exactly. So the ad one is like the little player in like they're in bigger water when they do something shady in that space. Again, that's not to say that all of them are shady, but like, I mean, where issues have come up, like that you'll hear about like the fraud, a lot more than you'll hear about like their false advertising.
I dropped some links into the chat box for people. I dropped the IAB standard terms and conditions for advertising that Mustafa mentioned. If you guys want to see what those are. I also dropped the website for the NAD so that you can see how to file an NAD action and what that's like. And then also the search, which is, I'm not sure why it's not on the same page, but the case report search where you can find all the filings is actually on a different website. So I dropped all of those here.
It's like, and they changed the website too during my career. It's a little tough to follow, but they are getting better.
Mustafa, can you tell us a little bit about your career path and how you ended up at LinkedIn?
Sure. So I was a summer associate. Actually, let me start a little bit before, because it's like crazy. I think it's crazy like how your any career like just ends up being, because I think there's just so much like just right place, right time.
Can you start? Why did you decide to go to law school?
Yeah. Oh, sure. That's probably a good idea, right? So I actually had a company. It's funny you said that because this is exactly what I was going to do because it's very relevant. So I had a company that was essentially recruiting, but also training in the space called regulatory affairs, which is a pharmaceutical. And New Jersey, where I'm from, is like pharma capital of the country, or was at the time. And so this practice was they were the people who reviewed pharma ads, pharma advertising, to make sure that they comply. Everything I said, but there's some industries that there's even more laws, more regulations involved, and pharmaceuticals are one of them. Alcohol is another, finance is another. So like the more down the line you get, like the more specialization you need. So I was recruiting people and training people on, and I had partners that like did this stuff because I did it. And so yeah, we were recruiting people and for that space, which is advertising review in pharmaceuticals specifically. I did that for a few years, and I started to really like the practice. And so because the law was such a big part of it, these regulatory positions weren't always lawyers. Some of them were just pharma professionals who wanted to practice in this area. I really liked the career path, and I said, let me go to law school to do this. Because I had more of like an interest in the legal side than like being like a pharmacist, for example. So I said, let me go to law school to do this. And this was about like 3-4 years after graduating undergrad. I was a paralegal for a while, so I was in the legal space and already thinking about law. But then I did this business, and it really sparked my interest to go to law school, specifically for this. So I was pretty focused on that. So I went to law school, and sort of accidentally, and this is where I say the luck came in, I just started to, for my first couple of years, I started to get an interest in IP more generally, because IP and advertising, they're kind of cousins. And so I said, let me think about like IP. And I kind of forgot about like my original goals of doing pharmaceutical, or I pushed it to the side and said, oh, I really like IP, so let me focus on that. And I applied for what's pretty unique in New York. I mean, maybe other states have it, but in New York, there's like a diversity like fellowship, bar fellowship. Like the New York bar does this like diversity. So essentially you apply, and it's a pretty strict, like it's a pretty involved application process. Like I remember I had to write a memo, like right after like my 1L exams, like just write another, just to apply, like write a 1L memo, interview with my law school, and then interview with a bigger board, and then interview with like just like a lot of rounds, and it was pretty involved, but I miraculously got through all of that. And what happened, the reason it's pretty, like I say, luck is involved, is when you get accepted to this position, you're placed blindly into an organization that is opted into it, right? So there's something like 33, 34 law firms and or corporations that sign up to get these like interns essentially, or summer associates. And it was random. It was a random like selection. And you tell them what you're interested in, and I think they try to help you. But I said IP, but like again, it was pretty random. And I ended up getting selected to a law firm I had never heard of. And I was like, oh, what is this place? I was excited to get accepted, but I was like, oh, what is this firm? I don't even know them. And I looked into it, and they happened to be a small law firm, but that was like the best law firm in the country for advertising law. And I was like, wow, I didn't like exactly like go for that, but I found myself like in advertising, even though in the back of my mind, that's why I went to law school. So that's why I say a lot of this is crazy luck, and I'm pretty fortunate to have landed there. Although at the time, it's like, I was like, why didn't I get into like, one of those like big law firms? And I was a little like disappointed, but it ended up being way better for me. So that's how I first got started in advertising. Well, I was a summer associate at this firm who's a big player in the space, and I just rolled with it. I was a night student, by the way, I should mention. So my law school experience was 4 years as an evening student. So I was a summer associate at this firm, and I like liked it so much that I was just like trying to like never leave. So I would like, after my summer associateship was over, I would like just speak to everyone there saying like, can I like stay here? Do anything, let me stay. And about like 2 months after my summer associateship ended, they called me back and said like, yeah, we could use some help in like this big litigation advertising case. And I went back. Again, I was working in the day. I was going to law school at night. So it worked out for me perfectly. And I got back in. I was like a fall like intern there. And I just never left. I never left. I just like, I mean, there were some busy times and some not busy times, but for the next, I remember I was a 4-year student. So for the next 2 years, I never really left the firm, and I just kept going from project to project, doing different projects.
That you did a part-time evening
Yeah.
program. That's, relatively rare. So,
Yeah.
do you think that having that extra, job to go to was a big impetus for doing the part-time, or did you just choose part-time right out of the gate?
I was married and at the time I'm still married, I should say, but I don't know why I said it that way. But I was married and like, yeah, I needed to work. I was gonna go to evening school regardless, because I was gonna work in the daytime no matter what, whether it would have been in the law space or something else. So yeah, I was working. I was trying to pay for law school as much as I could. I was just trying to be financially responsible at the time, so I didn't need the big loan. So yeah, I was gonna work regardless. I got very lucky that I was able, for the last 2 years, was able to work in exactly the space I wanted to work for.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So then after that, how long did you stay at that firm?
Yeah, so the firm was never, and by the way, I should mention that I went to law school during the last recession, so we're talking 2009, and so I can definitely relate to all the students here who are going through it right now. So it's here we are again, and it's happening again. Yeah, I stuck around. So they weren't going to like hire, because a lot of law firms had cut their summer associate program or their hires by like more than like 50%. So like my last year, I had this like temp job essentially, but I didn't have like a full-time offer. For those who are going through that, I was there. So I was also frantically, for that last year, I was going to law school, working, and trying to apply for jobs, just like a lot of people are doing today. So we can talk about like what that involved. Yeah, I stuck around. They didn't make an offer. I was actually there even during the bar. Like, so even after I graduated, I was working like 20, 25 hours a week there. Also studying for the bar, trying to get a job, working. Yeah, I stuck around for like 3-4 months and was able to get this opportunity to go in-house like right away. So like never really getting a law firm offer, but my first offer out of law school was this advertising agency.
Which is kind of unheard of. I mean, getting an in-house offer out of law school is really rare. So
yeah, I was, so again, like, yeah, I felt pretty fortunate. I did want to do in-house down the line, if you asked me at the time what my career path would be. But again, like as many of you have heard, it's like, going to a law firm is considered the best or easiest career path to doing that. You put in your time at a law firm and then you go in-house. But yeah, I was able to get in-house. So it's possible. But yeah.
Well, after the ad agency, did you jump around to anywhere else before getting to LinkedIn?
Sure. Yeah, we can keep going with that. Yeah, I do think all of that is just like it's fairly interesting how it happened. So yes, at the agency, I did about 3 years there. And I was at the time thinking like, well, what's next, right? I felt like there was a little bit of my career wasn't going to advance as quickly as I wanted if I just stayed at this ad agency. I wanted to do more. And I was looking at like other in-house jobs, right? And I was like not getting enough traction. I found like the most likely choice with me would just to be to go another agency and do the same thing. So I wanted more than that. And so I actually did consider going to a law firm at that point. But check it out, like even that was like a crazy story. So I was interviewing to go to another agency, like a higher position at another agency. And I got fairly far, it was like 3rd round. And it came to the point where you're going to get like references. So they asked for references. And I reached out to former colleagues of mine at the law firm. And one of them, a colleague of mine, she was like 2 years my senior. She was an associate 2 years my senior. So I worked under her a lot of ways. And I reached out to her for just a recommendation, just a reference. And she says, happy to do it, but I'm also leaving my law firm. And they're looking for a replacement. Do you want me to send your resume there? And at the time, it's like, law firms were in the back of my mind. Like I knew it was like, I would consider them, but I wasn't like really thinking about it. I said, sure, why not? Just like, I'm not gonna like say no to that, but like, I'm pretty far with this like agency. So like, yes, give me my reference as well. So she recommended me to the law firm she was leaving. And that was like her recommendation was like gold, and I barely even had to interview. It just got me the job at a big law firm, by the way, which I was just like, they weren't really like looking at me like my like last year of law school. So like I couldn't say no to that. It was a scary decision because it's law firm, it's big law, and I was not used to that lifestyle. I had honestly a pretty cushy job at the agency. It was a fun place. The hours weren't intense, and I decided to leave just for that career opportunity. And yeah, so I ended up going to a law firm. The law firm had a lot of interesting aspects to it as well, in that my entire practice group moved 5 months after me going to the law firm. And luckily, oh my God, imagine I wasn't picked to go with them, but we all went to another law firm. So I found myself in another law firm 5 months after leaving my job, which is scary, but it worked out. Also another big firm, so it was fine. And then it's
more often than people know.
Yeah,
where like there's a mass exodus from one firm, and then all of a sudden they all just leave and set up shop at another firm the next day.
I know.
It actually happens more frequently.
I know.
Than you think, especially if it's the head of the practice area that's driving all that. So
yeah, the head of the group walked into my office 5 months in. I was like, I'm leaving and you're coming with me. I was like, oh God, you hear about it, right? But you never think it'll happen to you. Especially again, like 5 months in, right?
But I love that he just took for granted, like, oh yeah, you're coming with me. There's no choice.
Oh yeah, it's very weird. It's a really weird process because like there's not a lot of industries that are like it, where you're like your boss leaves and takes you with them. It's just like you're not going to really find that in other like career paths. That's because of the partnership aspect of law firms. They're all like essentially part owners of the company. So they leave and they take a piece of the company with them. And so you can join that piece, which is weird. That's not going to happen in like a corporation. So like, yeah, they're like, you're coming, it was no choice, right? I mean, technically you have a choice, but like not always. And like, yeah, I was just going with her, but it was a weird time because she just like left. And like, I had to like still be there, like figuring it out. Like, it's cause like they can't, one thing people don't realize is the partner can't tell you until they quit.
Exactly.
Like you can't know about, I mean, like technically, right? Like if they do it right, which my boss did, like you can't tell people, you can't poach, right? Because that's like an infringement. It's like unethical to do so. So like I had no idea until she just left, and I was just still there for like 2 weeks trying to pick up the pieces.
Exactly.
Like, still like getting paid by this firm, but everyone knows I'm leaving. It's just like a really, really weird environment to be in.
I went through the same thing. So actually I interviewed and got an offer from a large IP boutique while I was in school, and 5 of their partners and the head of the practice group was about to leave and create their own boutique, but they couldn't tell me that. So when I came in for my first round interview, everybody was there. And then I came in for the second round, and all the offices were empty. Like, where's everybody? And then I get a call about a week later from the folks who just left, and they were like, "Oh yeah, our bad. We couldn't tell you when you were interviewing, but we moved down the street, and we want you to come work for us."
So
and it was bizarre, like you walk in. I walked in for the second round interview, and they had taken everybody's nameplates off the door. All the offices were empty. I was like, what just happened?
Yeah. So I had 2 weeks of that awkwardness. Yeah. I was like, I have no idea what's going on. But eventually, yes, the other firm called when I was joining, and you have like this, like not really interview, because again, your boss did all the legwork. So you're like just meeting them. You're like, okay, this is like my new job. And they make an offer. But again, like, you can kind of get misled into it because like you are changing jobs, right? And you do have like a new, like, new paperwork to sign, new salary to discuss. Like you are changing jobs, but it never like you didn't choose to.
It's just like a given. Like it's just a total given.
Yeah, and you never interviewed. So it's like really weird. It's like a weird period. But it could work big time to your advantage. I don't mean to like put it in a negative light, because we did go to like a better firm, right? And so I found myself at a better firm. So yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah, for me it was a little more precarious because we were leaving the big firm to tiny firm.
You were going to a tiny
and then I show up the first day of work at the tiny firm, and like there's no office furniture. Like we're all
Yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, I was like, I don't
No, I
know what
hear
I
ya.
just walked into here. Like, is this a fly-by-night operation? Like, tomorrow everybody will be gone?
Yeah, no, I hear you. It's a scary time. And it was going through it. It's a scary time. I mean, it's easy to think after the fact, like, oh, it worked out. But at the time, I was like, oh my God, what is happening here? I
So then,
left I left the job I liked, and I'm like in the middle of this legal drama. Like that's what I was doing. What did I do to myself? But yeah,
so then finally you've ended up at LinkedIn. So tell me a little bit about
yeah,
how being at LinkedIn is a little bit different than everything else you've already done.
yeah. I know it is different. So like for my last year at a law firm, I did start to get the itch to go back in house. I liked my law firm experience, but again, having tasted in house, and now having like the sort of career path where I felt like I could get possibly accepted by one of these other companies that wasn't an ad agency. Because again, like I did, if you think back to what I first said, I started to do all of these things I mentioned, not just like the transactional, but I did the compliance stuff, I did the litigation. I got exposed to a lot at the law firm. So I felt like, oh, I now have I'm more well-rounded and I can start applying. And I had an interest in tech. And so I said, I want to really get into a tech company. And what does that take? And so for like the last 6-7 months of being at a law firm, I just started applying to like all the tech companies I wanted to work for. What's interesting is a lot of the tech has like an advertising slant to it these days, right? So all of these big players have like an advertising slant. Even like Amazon started to like they bought an ad agency. So like and Apple, like they have like huge advertising divisions to advertise their own products. And then of course Facebook, Google, their whole revenue model is advertising. And then LinkedIn has a fairly strong advertising practice as well, though it's not like their biggest space. Their biggest space is, just getting a job or advertising jobs, not advertising products. But what I do at LinkedIn is I'm involved in product advertising. So whenever a company advertises on LinkedIn, their products and services, I'm a lawyer for that group. I don't touch the thing you think about at LinkedIn, which is jobs. I don't touch jobs. So, long story short, I had a lot of interviews. I interviewed with a lot of people. I landed the LinkedIn one, and I was very happy to do so.
Talk about that.
You want to talk about
because
that?
I think
I don't know.
especially for
That's a
these
long
students
story.
that are going through this right now, I think
Yeah.
it does really help them to see, like, hey, you're not going to get the first job. You might
my
not
God.
get the second job. You might not get the 50th job. But
Big time.
tell them a little bit about it.
No, that is valid. That's exactly my message. I failed 99% of the time. We'll talk about that. I was interviewing my last 6-7 months at all these tech companies. They're really, really tough interviews. And you interview with a lot of people. And so every interview was just so involved. Oh, and by the way, you also get like assignments. They all they'll give you like homework, like do this, just so they can test you out. So every interview was like a lot of work, and so it's tough to get those rejections. And flying over to their interview and getting the like third round, a lot of meeting with 15 people and like still not getting a job was like so common.
And did you ever get any feedback from the rejection at all?
I would ask for feedback. I do ask for feedback, and some of them just give you boilerplate feedback that like just you're not a good fit or we went with somebody else. But sometimes they will give you feedback, and like we felt. And I'll tell you, for tech companies, like tech companies interview in a very structured way. So it's a lot like IRAC. For your exams, you want to state the issue, again, like all of that, IRAC, pretty much every question you get, you want to walk them through that. And so the good feedback I get is like, well, we felt like you didn't like expound too much on like these issues and stuff. So like you left them feeling like, oh, maybe he doesn't know about so-and-so practice of the law as much. Like maybe like that's what it was, but that's what they would say, right? Like that, like you didn't like focus too much on that, or your answers weren't structured. Things like that is what the feedback they'll give, but like, not all of them will get into like your detailed feedback like that. It's pretty rare. A lot of them will just say like that someone else was a better fit. Some of them will say will like you enough that they will say you should apply again. Like you should, and it's genuine, right? You weren't a fit for this, but we genuinely want you to apply again. Because some of them will just say that and not really mean it, just to be polite. But like some of them will, and like the recruiter will help you apply again, so you know it's genuine. And that's what happened a lot. It takes a while. It was a grind, unless yes, I mean I got rejected for every job except the LinkedIn one, right? Yeah, so it's
but I think, you know, for a lot of people, they only ever see like, oh, they're reading through LinkedIn profiles and they're like, oh, these people have these amazing jobs. And I'm like, but you have to realize they might have been rejected 100 times before they got that really good job. But you're never going to see that. You don't
You're
see
never going to see it.
Profile rejected 98% of the time. Got it on those 2%, you know? Like.
Actually, I was talking to, at a conference, during all of this interview, rejection after rejection, I was talking to a former colleague who's like top of his class, like Harvard, like really well established. He landed at Apple eventually. And he was telling me, like, I was rejected so many, like, same story as me. And I would think, again, like, this guy can pick where he wants to work. And wasn't the case. It's like I interviewed so many times to like land this position. So yeah, it's a grind. It's a grind. But you only need one position. You only need one offer. So just keep at it, and right? You don't need 10 offers. You only need one. And the one I got was like I think I would pick LinkedIn over any other company. Like if you line them all up. So the one I got was the one I wanted. But again, it's just I got many rejections down the path, and it's a timing issue as well, because they didn't have this job while I was looking initially, and it opened up, and it was good timing. But I could tell you, even like when I was my last year of law school, speaking of rejections, I wanted to do advertising. That's just, you know, that's what I was going with. I had decided at the time, like, this is what I want to do. So I like emailed every like partner I could find in the country that did advertising, like literally, because, you know, with lawyers, you can find who they are. Like you go on the law firm website, you know, you can do the research, you do the legwork. So I wasn't like applying for positions, because I feel like, you know, I'd be like one of 10,000 lawyers applying for this position. So I was reaching out to everyone saying, let's just talk. Not even asking for a job, right? Just like every partner that did what I want to do, let's just talk. 9 out of 10 will ignore you. From the 10% that will reply, a lot of them will just say, sorry, I don't have anything to, like, you know, to offer you, right? And a lot of them, some of them, right? Like some of that 10% will say, let's talk, and you'll just do a video chat with them, and it'll be great, because you'll be talking to a partner that does this, and it's useful. Of all of my efforts, one lawyer did that. A few lawyers did that. I spoke to like maybe a handful of lawyers. One of them did it and said, come to the office and we'll talk. And this was a big law firm. I was like pretty excited about it. Cool, I get to talk to this big shot lawyer in the space. I show up, and just remember, this is after being rejected however many times. I show up, and I didn't know this, but he was treating it as a full-blown interview. I didn't even know that. I've gotten rejected so many, and he never said it. He just said, sure, come by and talk. I walk in, and he's like following me to the conference room, and there's like 3 other lawyers in there, and I'm like, and I'm getting grilled, and I had no idea. I'm getting grilled like for an actual job, and it was a tough interview. It was like tougher than even if I had prepared a lot, it was like a tough interview. And I left it. I was like, what just happened? Right? Like I got
ambushed.
But I got an interview with a big firm in the most untraditional way. It was so strange. And I felt like disappointed. I was like pretty down on myself. I was like, I just blew it. Not only did I get it, I also blew it. And I had no idea. I was happy. I was like, at least I decided to wear a suit. Like I didn't treat it too casually. But my God, it was crazy. And I felt like pretty bummed. Like even like I was like, oh my God, I just blew it. Like what just happened? It was all like a blur. But 2 months later, they actually invited me back. So I didn't feel so bad. Like I was like, oh, I didn't blow it. And I didn't get it in the end, but I didn't get it. Check this out. They were very gracious. I didn't get it because they hired like a 4th-year associate. I was like, oh, I can't feel bad about that. And they were very gracious about it, and they liked me. And I was like, I can't believe like that just happened, right? Because like, again, I was like going through this like, oh, I'm never going to get a job sort of thing. Which, by the way, if you're thinking that you are going to get a job, don't worry. You know, just keep going at it. But I was pretty down, but that's how it happened. So yeah, again, you just never know. And I have a lot of stories like that. The job I landed, real quickly, I'll talk about that because that's also crazy. There's so many like crazy reasons you end up in your career. I was just calling, just like I was emailing all the partners, I was also calling and emailing people in the ad agency space because like I could work there. I felt like I could because I had done a lot of like as a summer associate, I did a lot of work for them. So I had one conversation with this guy where I ultimately end up working in. Like he didn't have a job. It's like we don't even hire lawyers. He said, by the way, we use a law firm for everything. And so I hang up with him. He was very gracious again. He said, if I find anything, I'll call you back, whatever. He hangs up and his boss overhears him. Because it's like an open layout, everyone can hear your conversation, sort of like ad agency, which they all are like, before COVID. And so his boss just overhears him and like it piques his interest. Like, what was that about? And they start talking about it. And his boss, who's like global head of like the whole like group, rarely in the office, right, happens to be there during this phone call. I said, I like this idea. Bring him in for a talk. So again, I just go and I'm talking to them. It's not an interview, but this time I'm a little bit more prepared because I made that mistake. And so I talked to them about, I'm only going to make it once. I'm always prepared. And so it's like an informal interview, but they're essentially like, hey, we like the idea of bringing in a lawyer because a lot of what we do is these negotiations with our brands, with the brands, and like we don't have a lawyer, we use the phone. So we like this concept, but I'm like right out of law school, right? And I'm like selling the idea of like, yeah, you absolutely should have a lawyer. And so they're like, yeah, we like this idea, but give us some time to like create this position essentially because we don't do this. Even though it's a big like agency, by the way. This is just not how they operate. So they create this legal position. So
you were their first lawyer, or did they hire somebody over you?
And I was the first lawyer they hired. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. And so, but they had lawyers in other like countries. Like this is a big global, but they didn't have any like US based like lawyer. And even the lawyers they had in other countries, it wasn't a big group at all. It was like a handful.
Did you feel intimidated by that?
Every part of my career has been intimidating. Like you never, that never goes away. Yes, I was extremely intimidated. I was right out of law school and I was negotiating contracts with like big brands, like huge brands, like huge global brands. Like I felt like I had no business being in the room. So yeah, I was pretty nervous, but I was nervous at LinkedIn as well. You're never, that nervousness never really goes away, and I think you could use it to your advantage, right? Like it makes you work harder. Did you
ever have to call in, somebody else that was more experienced or anything like that?
I mean, we had a law firm that we could use. Like, I could always do that. But like, again, a lot of it was like, just like trying to figure it out yourself. A lot of in-house is like that. A lot of in-house is trying to figure it out yourself. Because you don't have the crutch of the partner. Which you do at a law firm.
You don't always want to pay for the big guns, right?
Yeah. So at a law firm, like the partner crutch is actually too much of a crutch, right? It's like you can't actually do anything without them. When you're like at a big firm, that's how a big firm is. Like everything you do is like it gets reviewed by a partner. In-house is different. It's scarier in that sense, which I didn't realize. Because you always think that, like, in-house is just this cushy, like, it's not. It's intense.
It's the Wild West, because you never know what's going to happen, and things are coming at you from all different directions.
And you're making the decisions, which at a law firm, if you guys haven't practiced at a law firm, a big cliche is, like, you'll just always say, like, it's a business decision, or here's my assessment, but, you decide. Like, that's what you do as a lawyer at all. But, as in-house, it's like, that is my decision. It's like, there is no one else. So a lot of the issues, it is my decision. Some of them are like the business team has to decide, but you have to tell them what the risks are. But like, no, it is pretty intense. Like in-house is pretty intense because you have to get comfortable with making decisions.
Awesome.
Yep. So, but yeah, LinkedIn, I mean, you asked how it's like, it's just great. Working in tech is awesome. Like they treat their employees amazingly. They hire like the best people like throughout. Like, so everyone you're working with is just like you're like blown away by like the people you're working with. You're like, oh my God, this person is like amazing. They're like the best at what they do sort of thing. Like a lot of people you come across. So it's pretty awesome in that. Everyone's really nice. The perks are just great. They really care about like the work-life balance. They feed you 100% of the time. Everything, when you walk into the office, you don't need a wallet. Like everything is just like paid for. Like those are the perks. But look at like all the tech companies. That's just how it is. It's like making the employee base like really comfortable. at their job, so they just focus on their job is like how these companies operate. And I could say it's true. It's like I don't have to worry. I go into the office and all I really need to worry about is like interacting with my colleagues and doing the best job possible. All the other things are like taken care of for you, which is pretty awesome. Like it's really, really, really cool. And it doesn't get old. Like, I mean, I've only been there about a year, but like it's pretty awesome.
Awesome. Does anybody else have any questions? I know we're at the top of the hour here, but if
I see the chat. I had the chat turned off, but there's some question. I said the Ambush interview was shady. It didn't come off as shady. It just came off as like remember, these partners will not even like partners like don't. They're not like normal humans sometimes. Like they'll like either ignore you, right? Because they're not even gonna look at your email. Like you're just like you're not gonna. They don't even like pay attention to some client email or something. They're so overworked. So like just the fact that like it wasn't like overlooked. It was just like he's like real quick. Yeah, sure, come by. And like, that's all he had time to say. So it was actually very gracious when you get to know how a partner is like for them to even take the time to do that. Actually, but they're just a different animal. It's like just for them to like reply to you, it was like a big deal. Even when you're at a law firm, by the way, to get a partner's attention can be tough. So they're just like, they're wired very differently.
any other questions, guys?
Can I ask one more question, Andrew?
Go ahead.
Yeah, so okay, I'm very much into video games, but I noticed in advertisement for video games, they would always have that discrepancy at the bottom of the video saying this is not real gameplay, right? So I know
you mean in an advertising? You mean in an advertising for a video game?
Yes, they would say,
okay.
It would say like, yeah, so like, and a lot of people, they read that, right? But it's not obvious. And I noticed like in a lot of advertising, they intentionally make the discrepancies like very small and hard to come across. I'm wondering if that should change in the legal world, like because that is kind of underhanded business tactics. Yeah.
So if the first tenet of advertising law is to be truthful, which is what I said, right? True and not misleading. The second tenet of advertising is to be clear and conspicuous in your disclaimers. This is what you're talking about. So like there's already a requirement for everything to be clear and conspicuous, meaning it shouldn't be missable, right? You shouldn't be able to ignore it. It has to be a certain bold face, large enough, right? So like if it is difficult to read or see or easily missed, then there's already a law for that. They're already infringed. So like, yes, what you're saying is the correct opinion of the courts and where the industry has gone. Now, if somebody's not doing it correctly, potentially they get in trouble for it. So yeah.
Thank you. I really appreciate your answer. Thank you.
Yeah, so you noticed, you hit on a key issue. So your thinking is correct.
Alrighty. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Mustafa. I really appreciate you stopping by. Would it be all right if they connect with you on LinkedIn afterwards?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Connect with me on LinkedIn. I can have answer any questions you guys have and even do a one-on-one chat.
Okay, awesome. Well, thank you so much. And
thank you.
Everybody, we'll be having another meetup on Thursday. So if you want to stop by for that. We also, our next virtual happy hour is next week, not this coming Friday, because it's going to be Independence Day. So you guys have this week off, but let me know if you guys need anything at all. And I look forward to seeing many of you on Thursday. So, all right,
Great.
bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet everyone. Take care.